Henchdays, don't go. Braden Harper here with the Mvskoke Media, bringing you another episode of Live Wire. I will be your host today, and the topic of discussion for our episode is the Lucinda Hickory Research Institute, a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to helping Mvskoke Indians research their family land allotment history. Joining us today is Cherokee citizen and founder of the Lucinda Hickory Research Institute, Miss Tatianna Duncan. Miss Duncan, welcome to Livewire.
Thank you.
And for those of us out there that are tuning in, don't forget that you can ask questions during this live stream. It can be found in the pane on the right-hand side of this video window. Just type in your questions and we will address that a little later down the road. So let's dig into this. Miss Duncan, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get started into land allotment history research?
So I am a Cherokee citizen, but I'm also Mvskoke. I belong with the Mvskoke tribe because my grandmother's Mvskoke, and so was her mother and her mother before that. So we are Mvskoke, but because of this allotment era, we become a very diverse people. I grew up in rural Oklahoma in Cherokee Nation, and my whole life I heard about our land being stolen. That's my Indian history, is the rich people over there with all the wealthy homes stole our land. So that's quite a history to grow up to. We were always proud of our Indian heritage for no more than we knew about it. So like after high school, there were no opportunities for college in rural Oklahoma unless you were a great athlete or super smart. And I'm just, relatively, I can, find my way home. Sorry, talking about my humor. So anyway, I was in the United States Navy, 4 years active, the rest in the reserves. I kind of considered myself a jack of all trades. I've done everything from turn wrenches on F-18 aircrafts to apply skincare and cosmetics at the beauty counter. So that's why I'm a jack of all trades. But when Gathering Place started to build, a lot of Mvskoke citizens were interested on who the original lottee was, those who were familiar with the allotment history in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So in that history, they found out Tugabachi was the original lottee, and he is my third great-grandfather. So I always knew Tugabachi as an ancestor. I thought he was more like a fifth or sixth great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. I was kind of surprised to learn he was only a third. So when this history came about and a lot of information was going about him, that's when I got connected. Actually, not until 2017. They were talking about him in 2006, but I didn't live in Oklahoma at the time. I wasn't really familiar with what was going on. So I've gotten off track. Will you bring me back? How did this get started? When they, go ahead.
Yeah, that digs into a little bit of my next question, which is, could you tell us kind of dive into the history of your family's allotment? You did some research on it. What all did you discover?
So in 2017 is when I made connection with one of the men who had been researching Tugabachi, J.D. Colbert. He had been doing presentations on Tugabachi. So scrolling through Facebook, I saw an article that one of my board of directors had written, Russell Cobb. So I commented on it. That's how I met JD, and he gave me the research that he had on my family. So I took that, and it wasn't easy. When he first gave that to me, it was very hard to read. There was, I don't know if they were panic attacks, anxiety, but I couldn't just read line for line. It took me a couple months to get through one of the timelines. It was extremely emotional. So if you haven't done this history, just be prepared for that. I think we call them trigger warnings today. It's far more emotional than I thought it could have been. So as I read that research and started doing my own research, it was extremely compelling. And Mom is right. Our land was stolen. It was unethically taken, even against our protest. The first time I ever pulled up our family history online was when the internet first came out. That was back in the 90s, I think. And I typed in my grandmother. And I thought there's no way anything about an American Indian woman born in the 1900s is going to be on this computer. But one statement populated, and that was her court statement that she made saying that we didn't want our land sold. We wanted to keep our land. She would have been one of the first to speak English in our family. Everybody else spoke Mvskoke. So that was a compelling day. And when you read that statement, you can't fathom how could our land possibly have been taken. Clearly, she said we don't want it sold. So with that said, that understanding what land I was talking about, because Gathering Place was what I started to research in Tugabachi, but it grew into something so much more. And those rich white people over there with all the wealthy homes, I found out that was 31st and Lewis. That wasn't Gathering Place. And then I found Lucinda's land at 21st and Harvard, and that was a coal mine and became, wealthy in gas. All that land was taken. And we have land over at Sheridan, so I found out where all of our land is, and that's interesting to know. And then to find out how it was taken is pretty disturbing. And I can say we're not a land back organization. That doesn't mean I don't think we should have our land back or that we should be compensated. It just, what can be justice for us could end up being injustice for people that had nothing to do with it. So it's really tough to make things right, I think. But when we are just about getting the information together, it's a history that I think is important to be told.
Right. So, Ms. Duncan, you are obviously very passionate about the research into your family's land allotment, as well as helping others uncover answers of what happened to their family's land allotment. Why would you say it's important for others to research their family lineage and learn more about just the history in that?
There's an element of completion. Having that dark hole or that emptiness of not knowing your relatives, especially as connected as we were to our Indian roots. That's what I'm no full blood, but I was raised in an Indian environment of assimilation. It wasn't ceremonial grounds, and a lot of the Mvskoke culture I hear about, I envy that life, but that's not what we were raised from culture shock, and always to be proud of an Indian, but it was more of a traumatic, I think, upbringing as far as being taught not to trust people. You don't show your emotions in public, all these things that now I see where that upbringing came from, because that was our life. When my great-grandparents trusted this couple, Sam and Ethel Davis, it was nothing but a disaster. They thought these people were their friends, and according to documents, they were not friends. Samuel C. Davis was half Mvskoke, half white, but I think he was more about progressing. And a lot of Indian people trusted Sam Davis, and they were taken by him. And I think Tulsa has a lot of responsibility, the court system. It would appear a lot of people were involved in it because they had to approve these sales, and so anyway, you have to watch me. I get off track. Once I start getting into the personal aspect, it's hard to come back from. But in talking about the LHRI aspect of it, that's where it came from. Once I started on this, I kind of feel like it was a calling. I feel like maybe this is something I was supposed to have always done. My mother growing up, she talked about our people a couple of times. Lucinda Hickory, I remember her mentioning one time, but it resonated with me because she said, and it seems like there was a Lucinda, and there was something that wasn't right. She said something wasn't right about the way she died, and that stuck with me. And when I get into the documents, it is peculiar. A young girl, it's unfortunate when young people die. We know that, and those were hard times. There were pandemics. There were, I don't know, not the same medicine. So I understand that people die. It's just that there was an alarming amount of people that died, and then their land would be gone. The other thing I want us to look into is the amount of young Native men that went to prison at this time. When Auntie DeBow can call Indians infallibly honest, yet we have so many young Indian men going to prison. That doesn't add up. So to attack the young people, I feel like was a breakdown in structure, and it was easier to take advantage. And I got to thinking, actually, just yesterday evening, Tom Cooney dies at 20, Ned Tugubachi, these were all our family members. All our young men mysteriously died, untimely deaths. So those were the men who would have probably been familiar with the English language because they grew up, around the settlers and the colonists and all. So to get those young men out of the way who could understand what would transpire would have been, easy. So this is the way I think, and this is why I feel like we're advocate for our Mvskoke people, and let's tell our story from our point of view instead of just reading a document and saying, oh, well, they signed off this land, so they must have, wanted that. Land ownership was not something that we did. That was a new concept. And tribal leadership knew that. That's what perplexed me when I saw that. It's like, oh, they knew what was going on. Tribal leadership said that our people are not ready. They're not ready for this. They don't know the language. I found that amazing because it was so true.
Absolutely. We do have a question in our group chat that we would like to address. It's from Brittany. She says, my great uncle sold our allotment that includes our family cemetery without getting permission from the other allottees. Is there anything we can do?
So I'm not an attorney. I'm not. When you ask me my background, I should have said that I'm not an attorney, and that's the other thing that frustrates me about the restricted land is when you still own it or you have to deal with it and you have to reach out to an Indian law attorney. Many times you don't get anything accomplished. I hear these stories. People tell me this. We have our own experiences. So I can't exactly. I don't have an answer for that. Except, I don't have an answer. I do the history on it and to try and find out what happened, and that's unfortunate. One thing that we had wanted to do a seminar on are our cemeteries for reasons like this. Tugubachi's family was disinterred, which is a grave injustice to his people, to dig him up and move him. That wasn't okay, but they did that. They moved him to Oaklawn. But then there's people like Brittany who can't visit their ancestors because now the land belongs to somebody else. So,
right.
I wish I had a better answer, but I don't.
Certainly. But if we shift this a little bit more toward the Lucinda Hickory Research Institute and talking about the services that they do offer, what is the mission of the LHRI, and what do you guys do for people that are trying to learn more about their family land allotments?
We're wanting to start the dialogue. We are a platform for our native voice so that we can start sharing our stories. All the information you have, people can call me and I can help them get started on the research. When I started, I didn't know what I was looking for and I didn't know where to find it. I was completely blind. I had that stack of research passed on to me from previous researchers, which was fortunate. But now I have an idea of where to go. You start with the DAWS number of your ancestor, and then I put it into Ancestry.com. LHRI was trying to obtain office space pro bono, because we are a nonprofit, in Tulsa, so that Mvskoke people or Native people could come in and research, and we could help them out. Because I went through Ancestry newspapers full 3, but that can be a lot on a family budget if you pay for that a month. And that 7-day free trial really is not going to be enough time. I've been doing this for 5 years, and I can still find new things. So we haven't given up on that venture, but we just haven't been successful with it yet, as far as that goes. But I have had people email me and call me and ask me about a certain piece of land, so I get on and I go through my links and I at least get information to get them started to do that. But our mission is to provide an awareness and to tell an untold story. I feel like we have a responsibility to our ancestors to share the story of what happened to them. I think it also gives us a better understanding of restricted land. People have problems with restricted land to this day, and those are the stories I hear. Like I said, from finding those Guardian records at the National Archives in Fort Worth, and I saw all the money that went out. Exactly like the family said, but we never had those records before. Oral history takes you a long way. I would take all those stories you heard growing up and keep that in mind and match it with the documents, and I think you'll see that they were pretty accurate. I've always heard about mysterious, untimely deaths. Always heard about them. Always heard about the Indian boarding schools, and it all comes out to be very, very true. You know, we just have documents that go along with the oral history. So we're a platform to start the dialogue and get people talking about it, is what we're doing right now.
Absolutely. Now, the LHRI recently had its inaugural allotment workshop in Tulsa last week. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How do you think the event went?
We were excited about it. I thought it was pretty successful, and it gained a lot more attention than we had thought it would, because we have a need to tell these stories and to let people know what happened and to get an understanding ourselves, I think. We did that because we want to get other people who have the same stories together. We're working on a documentary, and our focus is Tulsa. So here's the two parts to this. Our focus is Tulsa because we want to show the pattern and see how the court system's treated, you know, all the different people. But then when I get somebody from, say, Hughes County or one of the other counties with their stories, then we know that we have to provide a platform for that too, because it really makes a difference. It's hard to hear somebody talk about their story, because I experienced it as if it was the only person that it happened to. This happened across the board to all of us. It's painful. And we've had to carry these burdens in silence. One, because we haven't had access to the information. And it doesn't seem like people really care about what happens to the Indians. They feel like, oh, well, we have the casinos. The casinos don't benefit me. They benefit the tribal government to provide an overall structure. But this history is extremely personal. And when everything was being stolen and our people were being murdered and swindled, the government wasn't in place. You know, they were crippled because of the Curtis Act, and they weren't allowed to convene like they normally did until 1976, somewhere in the 70s, when they regained power of their own government. So we were really left out as citizens by ourselves to fend for ourselves. There wasn't anybody there to protect us as a sovereign people. And then we don't even become citizens until, the 1920-something? See, I'm no historian either. I am just a person who has researched my family's history, and I thought that it was important enough to do something larger. And I'm actually hoping to find a Native American Studies program, like maybe OU, to take this on in a very serious manner from a Native perspective. I don't know that the nation should take this on because it can get political. I wouldn't want to see it scrapped because it's possible to offend some prominent people, I think, with this history. I don't know. I also think society's ready to hear the truth about everything. You know, they're tired of the cover-ups, it would appear.
Certainly. Now, I do understand that the LHRI is looking to find ways to carry down, make sure that these stories are properly told. One way is something called the Mobile Land Allotment Display. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Who's going to be featured on it?
So with the Mobile Land Allotment exhibit, which we're currently planning, it seems like we keep getting it pushed back. And now it looks like we're looking towards the beginning of 2023. But it is very complicated. The Hickory family, of course, will be featured, and probably Millie Naharkey, because my other researcher, Dr. Russell Cobb, tells her story. And these are our full-blood Mvskoke ancestors. And it's interesting to me because we start with in the 1900s with Chugabachi, and you go all the way to Millie Naharkey, which I believe was 1923, and you kind of can see the progress. When it comes to Millie, I think that Indians were recognizing what was happening, and they were starting to kind of fight back. But her story tells you to what extent they would go to get this land, especially if it had oil. So with Millie, just before her 18th birthday, she's kidnapped by men from the oil company and taken across state lines. They fill her full of alcohol, they assault her, and they don't let her go until she signs her land over. What is that all about? Because she said no? So we go from murder to assault, but they don't stop until they get all the land. And that's how I see the history, and that's why it's important to tell it. We have to understand where our people came from. The positive part is I do get to know my relatives better, because my great-grandmother died in 1915. I've only recently become very suspicious of her death. Before I thought, well, she's 41, it's possible she died. But given what I see in her competency hearing, I don't think, being matriarchal, I don't think she liked answering to the white man at all. Some of her answers in her competency hearing were, you could tell she was very irritated. But then I saw my great-grandfather and some of his answers, and I could see he's trying to make it in this assimilated world. I don't think he liked it. He ran away from Indian boarding school. But when they ask him things like, how many 20s are $200? He doesn't know because he doesn't speak English, but he said, if you put it in front of me, give me time, I could figure it out. So I get to kind of meet my ancestors through these documents, and that's interesting, and get to know a little bit more about them. So, so those are some of the positive things, even though it's hurtful. It's hurtful that they had to go through a competency hearing just after their daughter died, whether she was murdered or not. She still died, and she was still a young girl, and that had to be very hurtful. Anyway.
Certainly. We have another question here from a T.Y. Prohl. He asks, do you think it's the duty of everyone who lives on the res in Oklahoma to know whose allotment they live on?
No, I'm not. I'm definitely not one to tell other people how to live and that type of thing. I think it's important, especially for big businesses, to recognize. I think it's their responsibility to community. When you're just an individual citizen, no, this is America. No, I don't think I'm going to force anybody to learn. But for LHRI, we would be interested in helping identify who these allottees were. And if a person wanted to know, then we could provide that avenue. But when it comes to places like Gathering Place, who's a community organization, then yes, recognize Tukubachi once owned that land. They don't even have to be the ones to tell the story. That's what we're here for. But I think it's important for in the context of history, to recognize more than just the Mvskoke Reservation. And that's only because of the way we were dispossessed of these lands. I've had people tell me, oh, they just got caught up in bad land deals and it was seller's remorse. But I don't think that's true. It was definitely more than that. And I think our people died from more than just pandemics. That's another thing that I'm told. Well, there were pandemics. Yeah, but they didn't have to take the land, also. The Guardians were supposed to help the Indians learn how to maneuver in this assimilated world, and they didn't. They took advantage.
Certainly. This is a little bit more of a personal experience question. Have you ever been to a business or a ceremony of any sort, maybe a graduation, where they acknowledged the land that they were, if it was presiding in Oklahoma or on the Mvskoke Reservation or the Cherokee Reservation? Have you ever attended a ceremony or anything where they acknowledged, where they were at geographically in terms of the land?
Well, I think a couple of places I've been to have acknowledged one, the Mvskoke Reservation or the Cherokee Reservation. A couple of places like Philbrook, they have been extremely supportive of what we're doing. And they recognize, they have a whole display on Lena Jefferson, who was the original lottee. And there again, she dies in 1907. I want a database. That's on our list of things to do, is to create this database, because we need to see how many young men in the area were sent to prison, how many people died, and then what happened to their land. So, there's a few people, and one of our things is to raise that awareness. I think these people's lives were important, and from a historical point of view, it's important to recognize them. I don't think every Tulsa citizen should be responsible for that. That wouldn't be fair to do. That website is allotmentera.wordpress.com, and our contact information's there. If we have an event coming up, it's going to be there. And we also have a Facebook page. I don't have a social media person to run all these things, so I'm not really good at keeping it updated, but our website has information. I also have research suggestions. If you use Ancestry, I have the links that are great to go to, so you don't have to, learn the wheel like I did as far as where to get their allotment jacket and probates and that type of thing. So our website's good for that. You can comment on it. You can reach out to us if you have other questions. So we have those two forms. We have a Twitter. Like I said, I'm not really the social media person. And the phone number and email, anytime you reach out to me, I've helped people that have had questions. I find where their allotment is. We're working on an interactive allotment map. Broken Arrow Museum is also working on that. So we're trying to make that happen without, disrupting anybody's lifestyles. That's been great for me for research. One of my advisors is doing it. So I could type in, say, Woodland Hills Mall, and it will go straight to the original lottee is. Yeah, so that's helpful. And we would like it to do a reverse search so you can type in your people and find out where their allotment is. But it can still be found. It can still be found. Yeah.
Certainly. Do you take donations?
Yes, we do accept donations. You can go to our website. If it's anything larger than 200, if you call me or email me, I can give you an address to send it to, because it can be expensive using the website. When you get higher than that, they want a percentage, so we do accept donations, and that's what we operate off of: grants, donations, and we're looking for sponsorship. Everybody on my team's volunteers. We're all doing this for volunteer work. People think I'm making money off of other people's stories. I'm not. I have my own family story. If I had that gift of writing a book, I don't need anybody else's story. So don't worry that I'm just trying to, get any capital gain off your family's grief, because I'm not. I understand it. It's a hard history to live with. And it's tough to drive around Tulsa knowing, most of that should have been long. It's not just the land or the money. Clearly that's important to our culture or to our success or survival today, but it's the family structure that was broken down. And taking all the kids and sending them to boarding school and losing the language. I often think of my great-grandfather, Thomas Hickory, sitting in a house with 10 grandkids who he could not, they understood him to, go do this or go do that, but to have that real conversation where you pass things on, he was alone. He was alone. I was told, never tell him to come to dinner. He will get mad. You tell him Humbug's Day. You tell him Humbug's Day. You don't say come to dinner. So yeah, those things. My great-grandfather's story, I think, is to me the largest part of our family story, and very heart-wrenching. I found him a very remarkable person to survive all that he did. So.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Ms. Duncan, I think that's about all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your time and joining us here on the Live Wire.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I hope that was helpful. And appreciate you thinking of us.
Mado, we really appreciate it. And for those of you out there that are joining us, that joined us today, thank you so much. If you would like to support the nonprofit, you can, again, you go to allotmentera.wordpress.com, and you can find resources to look up your own family allotment history or make a donation. In the meantime, I've been Braden Harper for Mvskoke Media. Mado.